Hello everybody, this is your professor from your Java programming class. As we complete our Java programs, mostly using the IDE like NetBeans or Eclipse, and most of the time writing our codes, or so far that's what we have done. We are going to change the coding style just a little bit and start using the JavaFX, the GUI IDE. This is something that we had seen early on, where the book introduced us to a separate IDE. It's called a scene builder, which we downloaded and just created a template using that JavaFX scene builder. We will continue our discussions where we would now start using the JavaFX or the scene builder to create that part of the interactive application, and then also write our Java code that would combine the scene builder, the FX, the XML document that we were creating with the scene builder with the Java code. Okay, so in this video, what I want to do is first of all talk a little bit about what a JavaFX scene builder and FX label is, and then identify a few parts of that IDE, the structure that we'll be using, the scene builder, along with the other Java codes, and then start writing applications using the scene builder and also the Java codes, and adding the events or the action listeners so that now it becomes an interactive application. So in the very first, or in the very beginning, we did one application where we really did not attach any codes. We just installed our scene builder and then showed a picture, but that's where we kind of left it. But now we're going to make it a little more interactive. So let's go ahead and get started. So as I was describing earlier, the JavaFX, the GUI application that is included in the JavaFX would allow us to create applications that would allow it to be interactive. Okay, and we will look into some of the nodes, for example, our labels and image views and the text fields and things like that in that process. So there are several templates that we can use, and grid pane is one of the templates. And I know this is kind of an early introduction without showing the scene builder, but I'll bring that up in just a minute, just to make sure that we are covering some of these objectives. And then we'll create a simple application which shows a picture, and then we'll add a few more templates in there. So these are some of the templates that we'll be doing, and then I'll also pull up the tip calculator application the book talks about and kind of show you how this is all going to work. And I'll create the entire tip calculator from the book. The book already has this example, and then run the program. Okay, so this is what we are going to be doing when we get into the hands-on part of it, how to get the entire application to work together. So before we start that, let's go over a few terms. GUI is the graphical user interface, also called the GUI, and these are built from the GUI components, which are sometimes called the controls of the widgets. This is some of the terms that you might come across in your quizzes, and I wanted to go over that. What it allows you to do is, with combination of the scene builder, we can do a little more and add to the productivity, because you will see that if you try to hand code everything, there's a lot of code that you need to be writing, and of course not actually seeing what's happening. That provides a disconnect. So with the scene builder, you will see that when you drag in a particular component or a particular template or any kind of a layout that you're using, you can actually see that on your scene, and you can drag and drop things, or drag and drop the nodes or the components on that template, and you can actually visually see how they are actually working. And along with that, it will show you how you can actually change some of the properties, associate events, and things like that. So that's what it would allow us to do. So our scene builder is a standalone JavaFX visual tool that can be used with various IDEs, and so in this case we're going to be using the scene builder, and it will let us drag and drop things from the library. Okay, so what it creates is an FXML document. So this is my markup language document, and then I would need to add some code. So here is my FXML code, and this is very important that this is separate from the program logic. Okay, so there's really three things that we would need when we create such applications using the scene builder. We will use the scene builder to create the FXML, which would let us visually create the template and the component, but then we have to go use an IDE to write some separate Java codes, and those two Java codes are mostly going to be, one would be the main application, which would house the main method, and the other one is actually a controller, and the controller is where you actually include all the logic of the components that you define in your FXML. So if you had put in a label, okay, once you click on that label, there is some logic associated with it, which is all written in that controller. So I'll show that to you when we create that application. Continuing on, so this is very important. So let's take a look at the scene builder and know some of the terms. So what you will see is on your screen builder, your basic, the basic space where you would be adding everything is referred to as the stage. Okay, so think about what a stage is. So it's basically an empty place where there is really nothing at that point. Then in that stage, you're going to start creating some scenes. Okay, and that's basically the window is known as the stage, and in that stage you would have different kind of scenes. Okay, on those scenes you are going to have these individual templates. It could be just a window template, a grid, or rows and columns. So these are all templates that you're going to be choosing and putting it on the scene. And also on the scene, or in those templates, you are actually going to have these FX components, like the GUI components. So as you can see, you have the blank space, which is your stage, and then you created a scene where it's just a basic window, and actually it has two rows. One row has actually it has two columns. This is the title of the scene. One column has this label called amount, and the next column has this text input box. So this is also a component. Okay, and then we went to the next row where I again have some text, and then I have something called a slider. So these are all components that are already present in the scene builder. And that's the advantage of the scene builder. You can basically drag and drop those individual components depending upon what is it that you are needing, to create your application. And you have again another label called tip, and to the right side in this column you actually have again a blank open text box, and then you have another label, and then another text box, and then you have a button. Okay, this is actually a button called calculate. So when we create these things in the scene builder, they are not active, because you can do this and then you can preview it, but if you click on this calculate button on the scene builder, nothing really happens. Okay. When you tie those two other Java files that I was talking about, the main and the controller, that is when this FXML document gets connected with the controller, and the controller starts to operate or brings in some life into these individual components. So then if you run the application, you can put in a value and you can slide your your percentage of tip, and then it will give you what tip you're going to be calculated, or what is the tip depending upon this slider, and then it's going to give you a total. So if you put in $100 and you say I want to give $15 tip, so that's your tip is going to be $15, your total is going to be $115. So as you put in this value over here and slide this option of how much tip you want to give, and you click on this calculate, it's going to calculate the tip and it's going to give you the total amount. Okay, let's continue on. So this is something that I already talked about, and these are important. So a JavaFX app window consists of several parts. You have the controls, which are the GUI components such as labels, text fields, buttons. I already talked, the slider. Okay, so these are components. The window in which the JavaFX GUI is displayed, again, blank is your stage, and it's an instant of the class stage. So we will have to bring in this package at the very top. So we will import that, and you should be pretty comfortable now with the classes and the subclasses and how they are being worked on. The stage contains one active scene. Remember I told you that the stage is the blank space, then you would bring on a scene. And in this case, active scene that defines the GUI as a scene graph. It's a tree structure, and the scene in turn is an instance of the class scene. So you have a class stage, and the object that you create is a stage object, instantiated. And again, when you create a scene, individual scene, that is also coming from the class scene. Okay. On the scene, you would have these nodes. These are my text levels, my buttons, my sliders, my labels, my text boxes, things like that. So these are all your individual nodes. And again, with the exception of the first node, which is the root node, everything has one parent. And then you have these individual these nodes, sliders and the labels. They also they can have transforms like moving, rotating, scaling. All these things are associated with those individual nodes. Okay, and then this is very important. When you have these nodes, these are with children and are typically layout containers that arrange their child nodes in the scene. So basically what we are saying is your stage is empty, blank. Then you have this root scene, which is also kind of looked at as a blank thing. Okay, so that's an instantiated object. Now on that scene, you can arrange that scene with different kinds of layout containers. So you can have something where, let's say this is going to give you a row column view. So you have rows and columns, and you can add more rows to it, you can add more columns to it. But then you can have another layout. Maybe it's a layout that separates between north, south, east, west, and a middle. Okay, or you can have another one which is just an image viewer. Okay, so these are all different kinds of layout containers. That is what you're going to be bringing on the stage or on the scene. Okay, and then you're going to be putting these nodes on that layout container depending upon what layout container you have chosen. So you can put in, if you have brought in a row row column container, then you would put in your node in the 0th row first column, or 0th column 0th row. So wherever that compatible that layout is, you're going to bring in all those individual nodes. Now, very, very important, the last part, these individual components that you're bringing on are not live at this point. Okay, it is only through this event handler, okay, that you actually give some life to them. Okay, so event handler is a method that responds to user interaction. Okay, so that clicking, that moving, those all has to call this event handler, and we'll talk about what an event handler and what kind of different methods there are. You know, there are listeners that you can add. So event handler is the method that you need to use that would respond to the user interaction. And all that stuff, you know, FXML's GUI event handlers, they're all defined in the so-called controller class. Okay, so remember, you always deal with three things, at least three. You may have more. One would be the FXML document. That is the document that you create through your scene builder. Okay, then you have the main class. The main class is going to call in, instantiate that scene, the stage and the scene, and would have the main method. Okay, and then the third one is the controller, which would then contain everything, all kinds of events that are associated with those nodes that you created on that FXML document. You know, so those labels, the text boxes, the buttons, the sliders, everything, they are going to be all controlled by, you know, codes written in the controller class. Okay, so it's important that when you create that FXML in one part, and I'll show you when I go through the code, that FXML calls the controller class properly. If they're not called properly, that's when you're going to see an error. Okay, so and then, you know, it talks about the label view and the image view, and those are all the individual ones that we will go in, and this is exactly this one. So basically, you created a scene where you have a label, okay, at the top, and then in this section you brought in an image view component, and you actually tied in some of the images. So if you actually bring this up, you can see the image over here. All right, so that's your basic those are some of the basic things that you need to know. Now let's look into a very simple code where we will implement all of this.